Alrighty. Now that we are live, I want to do the usual check to see if everything's good, because my sheet can be stuffing up sometimes. I just remembered, you can't actually hear me on here because I have this microphone and it takes up my audio, makes it so that I can't actually record. No. Audio makes it so that I can't actually record. Okay, that's good enough for me. Alright, so welcome back, guys. Another freaking video. It's called Lessons in Law, right? If you haven't seen a video called Lessons in Law from me before, then you're in for a freaking ride. No jokes. So if you want to check out my other Lessons in Law video for a little bit of backstory on what this series is about, but a quick little recap. We've gone through each number. We've gone through 1, the individual idea. We've gone through 2, how to relate your individual idea. We've gone through 3, which is the environment, the space in which you are relating and having these ideas within, right? This is like a representation of your physical body. And then we went into 4, which is when you're able to step out of that environment and have your own individual idea about said environment, right? And that can be a form of you having your mind, but that's more just like the idea portion of your mind. 5 is like, it's like the emotional portion. So having that reaction, having an opinion, having a like or a dislike, deciding on whether or not that experience was actually beneficial to you, right? So you're looking at it and you're looking at it with your 4, you're like, okay, I know this, you know, because I went through this, I experienced this. Okay, 3, you know, I was in the environment, in the space of this, which is 1, 2, and 3. Then you were like, okay, now that I know this, now I'm going on to 5. Okay, I feel like I don't like this. I feel like I do like this, you know, and that's what your 5 would be a representation of in a nutshell. If you want to check it out, you obviously have to go back to my videos, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, respectively, in order for you to actually get a full grasp of the concept that I'm trying to push through right now. Also, shout out to Dollar Parliament, because he's the one who even taught me about these numerology stuff, but I'm just more explaining it in my own individual way, how I kind of see it, looking at the energy itself for what it is too, you know what I mean? Because there's always there's objective qualities to everything, right? We can all objectively agree that we live in a world, but everyone's subjective perspective of that world is completely different. So we can't all say the world is one way or the world is another way, because we're all subjectively looking at it, right? But the thing that we are looking at is objective, which is the world, you know what I mean? So the subject, aka how we're looking at it, is very different from the object, aka what we are looking at, and that's why it's called objective. So if you're looking at something subjectively in the first place, you automatically bar or disregard a lot of the object, which is just the fact that that thing is that thing, because subjectively you're looking at it from your own subjective perspective. I hope people are following me here, but if not, feel free to drop a comment down below. Let me know, hey, Meister, you're speaking gibberish, what the fuck are you saying? And I'll just be like, okay, cool, let me explain it in a little bit deeper detail, you know, for anybody else who might not be able to understand it. But I'm willing to bet it's pretty simple and pretty basic to understand. So when it comes to number 6, right? This is after the number 5, when you have that 4, aka that idea, but you're looking at that experience or that original idea and feeling that you had, the original idea and way that you related that in that environment you had. Now you're looking at it from the outside and being like, okay, I do like this. Let's say you do like it, right? And then that 4 and that 5 starts to come together and you're like, okay, I want more of this. Let me create more of this. I want to have more of this experience. So you start paying attention to that because now it's something that you do like, right? So you start to make that a part of your reality. You start involving yourself into it more. You start paying more attention to it. You start building up a bigger space around what you've already created. And if you don't like it, then you're going to start building up a bigger space in order to separate or disconnect, which will eventually lead you to 7 and separating, or like separating from it in order to disconnect, or separating from it in order to rise to a higher state of being with that thing. You know what I mean? But either way, you're separating from it in general when you jump into that 7, because that's another higher aspect of 4, right? And it's also a higher aspect of 1, right? Because 1, you have an individual idea. Individual, that's already separate. You know what I mean? 4, you have another idea. An idea about something that's already separate because you've just developed your own way of thinking about it. You know what I mean? And then 7, that's another higher aspect of 1 and 4, which you're having that idea, you're separating from it, right? So you can jump into a new cycle, a new energy, not energy. So when it comes to the number 6, right? With the number 6, this is talking about you joining these two energies together because you've gone through that experience, aka you've gone through the first 3 phases, right? You've developed a body around that. You've developed a environment and a space that encompasses whatever you've just had that original idea and that feeling about. And then you've also added on to that and you've been like, okay, I do like this. I have an individual idea about this that I'm able to see it from the outside looking in because I've gone through so many experiences of doing this thing. And now I'm like, okay, I do like this. Now I'm gonna 6, I'm gonna create something new from this. I'm gonna have that joining of those 2 energies in order to create another one so that I can kind of breathe new life into whatever I'm doing, right? So that's that 6 energy. And just 6 in itself is kind of a representation of our mind when it comes to, if you look at them all on a kind of larger scale. I know I said number 4 video was the mind, right? But that's more of the mind in terms of you having your own individual idea and then looking at it from the outside in, aka separating from 3, separating from the space, the environment, from the body, right? And seeing it from the outside in, which is why I say it's like the mind. But really, if we want to get technical, I'd say arguably 6 is probably more like the mind. Because when it's 6 is also another higher aspect of 3, which is an environment, right? And in order for you to be able to like talk about your mind, that's an environment in itself that your spirit is residing in. For example, you can change your mind every single day. So that shows you that you are traveling spiritually, regardless. So when it comes to you changing your mind, right, you're jumping into a different mind, you're jumping into a different environment, right? And that environment is not immediate, it's not physical, so we can already rule out that it's not 3, and it's also not greater, it's not so expanded, it's not so large in terms of it being more in closer relation to 9, which is more separate, like it's more kind of all-encompassing, because 9 is like the kind of largest number before you get to 10, which is just leading on to compound numbers. So if you want to get technical, 9 is the highest number. Everything else is just a compound number, including 10, 12, 13, 14. Those are added on numbers. If you actually get down to the nitty and gritty, the the only true numbers that go up to the highest is 9, which is why if you hear somebody say there's 12 dimensions and there's 12 this, that's already lostness in a way, because how can there be 12 of something when 12 itself is 1 and 2 put together? It is not. You don't have 12 being its own individual number. You only have 9, and then it leads on to a compound number, aka 1 and 0, which we call 10. You know what I mean? So 9 dimensions there only is. But anyways, that's not really the point of this video. That is not really the point. So when it comes to Siren of Shadows, hey, shout out Siren of Shadows, thanks for the follow. So yeah, when it comes to all of this kind of stuff, you know, number 6, getting into this lessons and law video, number 6 is all about you know, how are you making up your mind? What are you using your mind for? What energy are you putting your mind into? AKA, it's kind of like going back to my other video. If you check out my other video on YouTube, and Nothing to Meister, or Meister Nice, I'm pretty sure it's called. I should probably change that username, because you really need to search out my username like letter for letter, otherwise it doesn't really come up. But it's just Nice with Naice, if anyone wanted to go click on that. But my other video on YouTube, I was talking about your esoteric currency and stuff like that. 6 is very relevant to this, because 6 is all about like what you're putting your time into. How much time and attention to detail are you putting into this actual experience, which is also, if you know about astrology, you'll know that the 6th house rules over Virgo, if I'm not mistaken. And what is Virgo, right? I just said attention to detail, didn't I, when I was talking about 6? So paying attention to the details of each second, of each minute that you're paying your time, your attention, your awareness to, right? So Virgo is a similar kind of aspect, where Virgos are very attentive. They're very wise at paying attention to the miniature details. They're very good at paying attention to many different aspects of something and kind of separating it and organizing it into different categories. That's like the Queen of Virgo, Queen Virgo. You get the idea. That's like what Virgos are the queens and the kings of, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, as you start to go into that, you'll be able to see more in detail about the different aspects of the number 6, because you will be able to look at it from, okay, the astrology perspective, the 6th house, and then you'll be able to look at it from how I was just explaining it, right? Which is like a more greater expanded version of your physical vessel, which would be like your mind, because your mind is like the first thing that comes physical before you actually jump into the physical. So all of this to say, you know, you'll be able to kind of break down these numbers a lot better, and you'll be able to actually develop your own way of reading and understanding numerology, or what they will call, a lot of people these days will say, angel numbers. But angel numbers themselves and houses in astrology are all derived from the original concept of these numbers that I'm kind of talking about now, which is like also why if you look at my thumbnail on YouTube, you'll be able to see the number 6, right? You don't need to look at my thumbnail though. You know, you already know what the number 6 looks like. Backwards, yeah. So the number 6 looks like that, right? As you can see, we've got the first circle underneath the 6, which is representing that original space that I was talking about in the start of the video, which is the 3, your body, your physical, right? So when it comes to you having that 3 there, that represents one space, which is why it's a circle. It's like an environment, you know, same way we're in a sphere, or what people will say we're in a sphere, or really we're in an atmosphere, you know, but that's a form of a sphere in itself. But when it comes to the sphere, you know, the sphere under here in the 6 number, then it goes up, around and over itself. So it starts to create its own sphere on top of the original sphere. which would eventually lead you to the number 8, which is 2 spheres on top of each other, right? Which is higher than 6. So you're kind of gradually evolving into the next stage, which obviously, you know, it kind of puts a dent in that when we're talking about 7, because 7 is completely different. 7 is a line. But if you look at 7 itself, what is it? You're building one line up that way, and then you're building a line that way. So that's like, what's it called? Going up, rising above something, and then separating from it, going left. You know what I mean? That's why even the way you would write 7, you build it from the center to the right, right? You're going right, aka what's righteous to you, what feels right to you, and then you're instantly taking a left. You're separating left field, going left field. Left is always about separation. Right is all about things that's you're connected to. You know, that's kind of another video before I get deeper into that kind of concept. But if you want to check out more, Dollar the Pilot Man on YouTube, check him out. He always goes deep into detail about all of this kind of stuff, especially like left, right, all the directions. If you like have an idea as well, like let's say you're Native American, or let's say you're part of a culture that kind of is more into like kind of spiritual or occult kind of ideas and practices, or esoteric knowledge. Like let's say I'm sure people would hear, if you're like a witch or something like that, you would know about like the left hand path, and how the left hand path is a representation of separating, or going, you know, kind of going on your own individual path. And a lot of people will get the misconception that the left hand path is automatically bad, right? But if you're a witch and you know your shit, you would know that the left-hand path is more just about separating from something. It's not necessarily about good or bad. It's just about being separate from something. And a lot of the time, being separate from something plays out as negative in a lot of people's reality, because they are the thing that you're separating from, if that makes sense. So, interesting as well, because if you check out my other videos, it's definitely a stark contrast between the way I'm explaining this one and the way I'm explaining the other numbers. There's still similarities between them. Like I break down the numbers pretty similarly in terms of the energy, the energetic signature of that number, right? But when it comes to, how do I say, when it comes to how in depth I'm actually explaining it, that's kind of a different story, because now I'm like actually fully explaining, okay, like kind of the layers of the number 6, where I'm explaining like not only the symbolism, but I'm also explaining the energy, and then I'm also explaining the build up, which was similar to my other videos. I explained the build up of each number, getting to the number that we're talking about in this specific video. So it's interesting too, you know, noticing how when I made these videos, it all kind of led up to it for myself. You know, in my own personal life, I started to learn more about these things. Right now, I'm learning still about number 6, but on a deeper level, on a greater scale. So I'm learning about how, you know, when you do pay attention to certain things, you start to build those things as a creation, right? You start to build that detail. You start to create a more greater expanded form of that thing. So now it starts to become a bigger part of your world. So let's say, like, for example, me, if you check my video out, my other video on YouTube, testimony, sorry, there's a lot of video plugs in this freaking video, but it's just for context on what I'm talking about, and because I don't want to go through every single detail every single time I do a video, because it gets a little bit old. Especially like if you look at my videos on YouTube, I've made like probably nearly 100 videos now, so it gets to the point where like sometimes I'm repeating myself, and I don't really like to go over and over and over, round and round, you know, in circles. So I just give those references for those videos for anyone who'd like to know deeper context. But if people don't need context, or they don't even want context, that's okay too. So then we can just get to the nitty gritty. You know what I mean? I like that shit. So when it comes to my other video, my testimony video, that's what I was talking about. Sorry guys. My testimony video, I was talking about how I used to be in a real negative space, a real kind of lazy space. I wasn't motivated, and I wasn't really driven to go towards a lot of the things that I'm driven towards now. When nowadays I'm more in a space where I'm very motivated to do a lot of things. Haven't actually been making videos much lately in the past probably week, but I've been motivated nonetheless, because behind closed doors I'm motivated on other shit, you know what I mean? But now I'm getting more into that space where I'm like, okay, I want to make more videos again. Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, you know what I mean? But anyways, just being in that space like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I'm not too fussed on the time, but you get the idea. I was in that space of being unmotivated, and therefore now that I'm out of that space and I'm jumping into a more motivated energy, I'm able to look around and I'm able to see my own creation, see my own reflection. This is why people say as well, you know, everything's like a mirror. That mirror is kind of like similar to the 6 energy, because if you look at the 6 as well, you know, you got that space and then you got that thing looking over, kind of being on top of it. So it's not fully able to separate like the 7, where it's just completely going to the left side of it, you know what I mean? It's still on top of it. It's like stacked on each other, you know what I mean? So one is trying to go this way. Well, actually it's directly opposite for you guys. So one is trying to go that way, one is already that way, and it's already established as a sphere. But your top part of that 6 is kind of going that way, because it's like, okay, I want to jump into something more righteous. I want to jump into an energy that's more connected to me, you know, something that's more connected to who I want to be as an individual. And then that's where things can get a little bit tricky, because for me, I know back in the past, I would look at my reality and I'd be like, okay, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. But then I keep seeing all these aspects of my old reality, all these representations of who I used to be, which comes in the form of people, places, things, you know, all kinds of shit. So maybe some days I might feel how I used to feel. I might feel unmotivated. I might feel lazy. I might feel this. Or some days I might just experience a literal physical person in front of me that's like the spitting image of the characteristics that I'm trying to separate from. So, you know, how I used to struggle with motivating myself. I'm visually seeing people in my reality like this person is like exactly the spitting image of when I struggled to motivate myself. And so, you know, just getting to that kind of middle ground where you're like, okay, accepting and acknowledging that, okay, I see this is a reflection of who I used to be, but I also don't accept this as who I am right now. And a lot of people, I feel like myself included back in those days, will get caught up into that and be like, okay, I see this is who I used to be. And then I would be like, well, maybe this is who I still am if I'm still seeing this in my reality. But time doesn't work the same when it comes to, you know, how the universe works and we manifest things and create things in our reality. It's not all exactly the same like that. So you have to have grace with yourself. You have to have understanding or overstanding and be able to say, okay, yes, I am experiencing this thing that is a representation of who I used to be, but no, I do not accept this as who I am right now. I know that I'm going to greater, bigger, and better things. And despite the fact that I'm reaching this hiccup, I more now see this like, okay, this is just a hurdle for me to jump over rather than to charge straight through or to go around and avoid. It's for me to jump over and to show myself that no, I'm not under this anymore. I'm not a part of this anymore. I'm now jumping over, just like the 6 jumps over the circle, you know what I mean? So just like that 6 goes over that little initial circle, you too can jump over your initial circle, your initial environment, your initial space that you created for yourself, for you to be locked into and feel like you're going through cycles and cycles and circles and all this kind of shit, you know? So you have that choice when you get to that number 6. You have that choice when you jump into an experience that's mirroring who you used to be. You have that choice and that ability to be like, you know what? I see this, I acknowledge this, but I don't accept this, and I don't want this to be a part of my new reality. So by default, you're already creating that sex, you know, bringing 2 energies together, the old energy, the new energy, in order to create a new one, which has nothing to do with the energy that you used to be in, where a lot of people might get lost into that 6, and they'll be like the old energy, the new energy, and then they kind of get the new energy mixed up with the old energy, and then so when they come together and they have sex to create a new energy, it ends up creating a new energy which just mimics the old energy that they were trying to get out of, and then it just becomes another cycle. This is how people end up, like, you know, stuck in cycles for the rest of their life, because they're not able to separate, and they're not able to get to the 7, because once they get to the 6, they kind of just take themselves back to the 1 almost. But it's not really like that. You're still going to get to the 7. All of us will be able to get to that 7, that 8, and then that 9, but it will look like, for some people, like they're going back, you know what I mean? Where in actuality we're always expanding and contracting. We're never actually retracting. You know what I mean? We're just expanding and contracting. So you can't contract once you've expanded. It's like, let's say you've expanded into a certain horizon. It's like you can't like forget the things that you expanded. You know what I mean? So like, if expansion is a representation of you gaining more wisdom or you gaining more knowledge, you can't just like unwise yourself, you know what I mean? You still have that wisdom, you just might lack the capabilities to be able to actually utilize that wisdom, you know what I mean? But the wisdom is still there. So it's like a tricky thing where, you know, some people can get lost and think, oh my gosh, like I'm really up in this shit, like I'm stuck in this cycle, I'm stuck in this never-ending loop, I'm stuck in that, all of this kind of stuff. But in actuality, you're never really stuck. You're always just expanding and contracting. Do you think a perception of separation is needed to calculate objectivity? Also, hi, thanks for sharing this expression. Very fascinating perspectives. Thank you for the comment. I appreciate that. Do I think that the perception of separation is needed to calculate objectivity? That's a really good question. I like that one. So I think it's a necessary component in order to actually reach a more objective space for yourself, right? But in order to understand as well that you can never truly separate from your own like self, you know what I mean? Because even if you separate from yourself, you're still always looking at it from your own individual perspective. So it's it becomes a point of like, yes, you can calculate objectivity as much as you can from that individual perspective, but it's still an individual perspective, so it's going to be subjective by default in some kind of way. But as long as you have that kind of wisdom, and that in itself, knowing that even though, yes, you are separating in order to calculate objectivity, but you are still looking at it from a subjective perspective, by default, you're kind of separating as best as you can. So you can get close, definitely, by separating and calculating that objectivity. But when it comes to, yeah, just knowing that in itself, you'll always kind of be in that perspective where you're like, okay, well, yes, I can look at it from a separate perspective, but me separating, I'm still looking at it from a perspective. And that's the key word here. It's always going to be a perspective. So unless you can be the object, then you can't truly look at it from an objective perspective in the truest sense. You know what I mean? I hope that made sense, but so back into the video. When it comes to, you know, I could also tie it into that as well. You know what I mean? Because when it comes to like that in itself, you know, you can never truly separate from that original space that you are, because you are like, you are no thing. You know what I mean? You are just a space experiencing these numbers. So in order for you to actually go through these numbers, you have to be null of a number in itself, if that makes sense. So because the numbers themselves, if you're going through them, you are not them, because every time you would change number, you would be a different person, you would be a different being, but we know that we are not different because we are going through an experience. We are the same being experiencing different things, you know what I mean? So the being itself is not really attached to anything, you know? So all the things like numbers, ideas, concepts, all of these things are just things that we experience. They're just things that we wear like a suit of armor, you know what I mean? So me, myself, my alias on YouTube is my star, you know, be a my star of your reality. You know, if you know German, Meister. I'm not German, but you know, Meister, you know, Meister is a representation of a master, you know, so being a my star of your reality, but it's also a play on words. You got my star, because I'm an individual star, I'm an individual body, you know, I have 5 points. I got my head, my 2 limbs on my top half of my body, and my 2 limbs on my bottom half of the body, you know. And then 1 limb in the middle. Nah, that was so gay. So yeah, when it comes to that, you're able to kind of... Sorry, hold on. I'm trying to find my point again. I got a little bit sidetracked there. So let me just go back to my YouTube video. See, this is what in the past I had this just right here on my YouTube video. In order for me, if I needed to, I'd just open YouTube and then check it. But it's not very good because sometimes I don't forget like that. So I find myself not getting into that habit, but I might need to make that a habit. See, this is what in the past, like numbers, ideas, concepts, all of these things are just things that we experience. They're just things that we wear like a suit of armor, you know what I mean? That's what I was saying. I remember my point. Yeah. Yeah, so my alias is on YouTube is my star, right? You know, that's just a representation of an expression that I have. But you know, looking at me on YouTube, that is not who I am. That is just a representation of the energy that I can actually emit and emanate throughout from my individual space. So my space is using different energies and different symbolisms and different concepts to express itself, but the space itself is not these concepts. It's just able to express. So the same way how you can use as many words as you want to express the way you feel, but we also know that it will never truly emulate the actual feeling that we are feeling. You know what I mean? That's why sometimes it's difficult to explain our feelings, because our feelings is more closer to our internal, and our internal is more closely tied to our space, which is no thing. So same way our feelings, almost you can't really explain them with a thing. It's the same way you as a space being existing, you can't really fully explain that. You can use as much words and as much concepts as you can to try and nail it down, but you can't actually nail it down. You can't actually be like, I can't grab my space, my spirit, right? And I can't just say, here, this is the spirit, guys, you know, this thing here. No, we can't say that because it's more intangible. And this is why there's such a confusion among many different people where they're like, okay, the spirit does exist, the spirit doesn't exist. But in order for you to even be here and be expressing, you have to have a spirit, because how can you express something using concepts? How can you use concepts unless you are beyond that concept yourself, if that makes sense? Awesome way to compartmentalize that understanding. Definitely has me pondering. There's a lot of wisdom in your words. Appreciation. Thank you. I appreciate that compliment. That's cool as, you know. I love to hear feedback, so I appreciate that so much. I really do. As much as my words can kind of come across as blunt, but I try to be as just, you know, cut and dry as I can, where, you know, because I know sometimes, especially myself back in the past, I used to be a lot of a people pleaser. Heavy on the people pleasing. So back in the past, I used to be real put like as much emotion and feeling into my words, but that also stemmed from me growing up. I always felt like the way that I expressed myself wasn't enough emotion of how people wanted, because I know I saw everyone else in my reality. I pay attention and I'd be like, okay, so many other people I see, they express their emotions wholeheartedly. And so I thought, if I want to be accepted, or if I want to be a good person or genuine, I had to do that. But I started to grow older and I was like, okay, I think I'm putting, now it started to become, okay, now I was looking at myself, I was like, I think I'm putting on a character as opposed to just being my individual self, which sometimes might be perceived as dry or not genuine, because, you know, I might not be as emotional as some others, but I feel like genuine and real knows genuine. So if I'm being myself, that will be recognized regardless, you know. So I do tend to go in little tangents on my videos, so bear with me, guys. Shit happens. But, you know, I notice as well, my tangents tend to be pretty relevant to the topic too, because I was also talking about, you know, that was also in relation to the kind of space, the environment, the vessel, or the mentality that I created for myself from my own perspective, right? So it's kind of all ties into this kind of, you know, fiasco. I don't know if I'll call it a fiasco, but you get the idea. Ish. I think I need to go get a drink of water, guys. I will be back. All right. Back to the video. Blessings. I'm used to thought trains running off the tracks. Alamara, great work. Enjoyed this corridor immensely. Oh, corridor, you're Maori. Kia ora, kia ora. That's beautiful. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I noticed that too with people who tend to come across my videos and comment. They tend to be, even I get a lot of people commenting like, yeah, I go off track as well, and I'm like, oh yeah. And that's, again, that's a testament to that whole number 6 energy, you know, because we're all kind of experiencing different reflections of ourselves. And that ties into this other topic that I wanted to get into with this whole video, which is, you know, when it comes to things that you experience, like the common denominator is always you. You know, we are always the one experiencing the things that we are experiencing. And I love that you put the dragon there. That's some, love the dragon. I got a Draco moon. So my moon sign is actually in the constellation of Draco, which is interesting. So that's why I was like, I love that you put the dragon. And I was born in the year of the dragon, mind you. So that's very, very almost creepy. I'm just like, that's kind of creepy that you put the dragon there too. But that's all right. That's all right. So what's it called? What was I gonna say? Yeah, so, you know, we are always the common denominator when we experience all of our experiences, you know, same way that you may experience something completely different to another person per se. You know, we're not always experiencing the same exact reality. We can all exist on the same world, you know, but your world and your experience of the world may be completely different to mine. You know, I've had so many people growing up in my life who I've constantly seen they're in a world where things are dangerous, where the world is dangerous. And don't get me wrong, I don't disagree that there are dangerous things in the world, right? But my experience of the world has been actually quite different. And if anything, because the main thing for me is what I keep seeing is when I'm in situations of danger, I always seem to get out. There's always a way for me to get out. Like, I haven't ever had an experience where there's not been a way for me to get out. And I'm not discrediting other people's experience, you know, for other people, because some people, you know, God forbid, you know, all respects to those people who have been in situations where they haven't been able to get out of those experiences. But the key concept here is that we're all experiencing our own individual reality. So same way I experienced my individual reality, where I was constantly able to get out of experiences of danger, you know, bar my skin color, because I know a lot of people will probably hear that and they'll be like, oh well, of course you'd be able to get out of danger, you're you know, you've got light skin. You know, I know a lot of people experience police brutality, you know, prejudice based on their skin color, the way they look, you know what I mean? Which arguably I've experienced that too, because I've had a lot of people actually think that I'm Arabic, but that's all, you know, that's a different prejudice. That's not the same as if you were, you know, darker skin tone, or if you looked like a certain ethnicity that is very heavily targeted or stereotyped on the news or in the general public, right? But barring all that, you know, even just coming into personal experiences with other individuals, you know, I've been to parties where I've been attacked and like out of nowhere, and then I've always seemed to find a way out. Or I've been in situations where people, like, I remember this one time, someone chased me in a car, and me and my friend were walking at nighttime. This was around, I can't remember the year, but if you remember, like a couple years ago, there was this big craze online about how people were going on clown hunts, and they were trying to hunt down clowns so that they could get these killer clowns, because apparently there was these killer clowns. There's people like walking around in clown costumes, like either killing people or like acting like they were killing people. I don't know, some crazy shit. But anyways, they had said to the police that they thought that I was a clown when they saw me. However, I don't think that was the case, because they had their headlights directly on me, and it's pretty easy to see someone if your headlights are directly on them. You can clearly see, oh, okay, that's a person, that is not a clown. Unless, like, you know, I don't know, maybe possibly that person could have had sight issues, right? But regardless, there's multiple people in the car and there was multiple lights on me, so I just don't see that being the thing. But regardless, you know, that in itself, you know, I was out at a dangerous time, could have been put in a very dangerous situation, but I also ended up making my way out of that situation, right? So my point was that I'm constantly in experiences where I'm always able to find ways out of dangerous experiences, out of negative experiences, out of all types of shit. You know what I mean? The key component here is that I'm always able to find my way out. And that's what I'm paying attention to. That's what my awareness is building on. You know what I mean? For me to be able to create that experience, for me to be able to stack on that number 6, stack on that experience on top of itself. You know what I mean? And then as well, sorry, I had another point. Where was I going with that? As well, there's also, how do I say, my mind just went off track, guys, now. All right, sorry guys, I just had to clear the energy in the space, get myself a little bit clearer, you know, get some feathers up in this bitch. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, so back to the topic. As I was saying, with the whole paying attention to things and being able to constantly experience those, same way that, you know, for example, someone else might find themselves constantly getting into experiences. I've met many people in my life who they just they either tell themselves or they tell me they just can't seem to stop themselves from getting into negative experiences. They feel like they've got bad luck. They feel like they've got all these different things going on in their reality, right? Key word, they feel and they think that, so they're constantly adding onto that experience, right? They're constantly making that reality for themselves and stacking that on their original environment, their original space, their original perspective, to just add on more and more. And so it becomes heavier and heavier, and they start to condense that and experience that more in their reality. And that's how, like I was saying earlier, you know, people can get lost into a cycle where they just constantly feel like that this thing is happening to them and that thing is happening to them. But without realizing that we're creating our reality every single day through our awareness, through our experience, through what we pay attention to, you know, because just that, you're paying attention to it. So you're paying for that experience in order for yourself to experience it more, which is what I was talking about in my earlier part of the video, how my other video on YouTube, I was talking about, I think I left it on YouTube. Bear with me if I didn't, because when I first started making videos, it was on Twitch. And then as I started to notice Twitch deletes your videos after a while, I moved on to YouTube. But then some of my videos I couldn't actually transfer because YouTube, I kept transferring it and YouTube kept saying error, and no matter, even I tried like all the other fixes, because people said upload it in separate stages and then post it. I tried to do that and it didn't even work. It kept saying error, and then eventually a few of the videos worked, but I think half of them were already deleted by that point. So, you know, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you can't really help shit because shit gets in the way and blocks it, but then you just gotta like try again, you know, try again another time. So if I didn't make that video, I'll definitely be making another video where I talk more in detail about that similarly. Probably won't be the exact same video because I don't like to repeat, you know, the same shit. But if it is, that's cool too. You know, we'll see for the future, So interesting how my chat is not coming up on here, my YouTube chat, because normally it does. So I'll just check to see if we got any comments, any I don't know, maybe questions, who knows. Might be something on YouTube, might be something. But yeah, as I was saying, you know, the key word, the key component in every situation like that is that these people are constantly paying attention to these experiences. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, you are constantly being aware of that experience, you know. Same way. All right, now I feel like I'm going around in circles. But yeah, you know, it's like I was saying earlier in the video, you know, you can't really, like, for example, you can't say that one thing's true for another person because they might have had a completely different, like, 180 experience to you, you know. Some people will say that it's dangerous to go out at night if you're this and if you're that. Other people will say it's perfectly safe. You know, I grew up in that whole world where everyone would tell me it's dangerous to go out at night. So many things to fear at night. Don't get me wrong, there's things to be cautious of, but I love to go for night walks. And if I was to let my fear get in the way of that, I would actually lose out on some of the most beautiful experiences that I could experience myself going out for night walks, because night walks is actually one of my favorites. That's one of the things I look forward to every week, every day. I'm like, oh, you know, hopefully I can go out for a night walk tonight. I can't wait to go out and see the moon. Can't wait to go out and see the like trees, I don't know, whatever, like just something, you know. As long as it's at night, I'm happy. I love it. And when I'm in that space, when I'm in that perspective, I don't think about, oh, someone might jump, I might occasionally get that thought like, is there someone behind me? But I also have that awareness to be like, no, I'm not about to let that ruin my experience, because I'm going through a blissful moment right now. I'm literally experiencing bliss, being out here in the night, feeling the wind, feeling the peacefulness, hearing the crickets or the cicadas or whatever, all of that shit brings me peace. So why would I let anything else exterminate? I was going to say exterminate that peace. I would not want that to happen. No, thank you. No, thank you. And if that involves, like, if I have to, die because I was too, confident and not careful enough, at least I died happy. That's the way I see it. You know what I mean? So just that in itself, I create the space where I don't actually experience negative things when I go out anymore. I don't want to jinx it, but I also don't think I'm going to jinx it. I just like to use this as an example so other people can get an idea of where I'm coming from, the kind of concept that I'm trying to convey in this video. So, I'm trying to think. Pretty much, I feel like that's pretty much all that I wanted to talk about in terms of this. In terms of this video. Hi. The cat's looking at me. So just let me think, just let me give myself a couple seconds. Anything else, any other topics that I wanted to talk about, anything that I might have missed, anything that might be helpful to add on, right? I feel like there's other stuff, but it's also like I explained it enough in this video. If you go through the whole video, you kind of get the concept that I'm trying to think that I should explain, you know what I mean? And that's where, I feel like I'm jumping into that energy of over explaining, you know what I mean? And that's another space that I'm trying to get out of. So just in life, you experience these every day. You experience many different aspects of each of these numbers, each of these energetic signatures of these numbers every single day, on small scales, on large scales. And it just depends how aware you are, how adept you are at kind of paying attention to those details. Number 6, 6th house, Virgo, and then you'll be able to kind of pinpoint each individual instance of when you experience that. Because now, like, as I go more into these videos as well, and as I explain these numbers on a deeper level in these videos, it also gives me a deeper understanding beyond what I already know. And then it also grants me a better way to kind of attack each situation, because now I'm like, okay, that's another 6, I'm able to see, okay, that's another added on experience, that's another added on vessel that I put onto another experience that I might have experienced as a child. Like, let's say I went through a certain trauma, and now I'm constantly aware of this trauma in the external world. Let's say one thing, like, let's say, I experienced a whole bunch of people talking about me or just gossiping a lot, that might be something that kind of mentally it took a toll, because now I'm like, okay, I really hate gossip, and then I'm looking at the external world and I constantly am experiencing gossip, because I'm constantly in that state of being where I'm trying to avoid it, right? But just you trying to avoid something, you're automatically being aware of that, because in order for you to avoid something, you have to know that it's there, you know what I mean? So the best way to avoid something is to just kind of stop thinking about it as best as you can. And meditation helps with those kind of things. This is why I love doing meditation. This is why I encourage others to do meditation. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that it's always necessary, because there's other ways to meditate too. Like, let's say just clearing your thoughts in general. Or like I was saying, how I love to walk at night. That's a form of meditation, because when I'm out walking at night, it literally makes me forget about every other thought and feeling that I might have. And I just feel completely at peace. I feel completely at ease, and I feel completely free. You know what I mean? So just that in itself, those are ways that you can kind of separate from all of those. If you have a substantial amount of 6 energy or 3 energy, because you've stacked on a bunch of experiences, a bunch of ideas, a bunch of feelings about an experience, a situation or person, place, thing. And so now you're constantly seeing that in your reality, and you're like, how do I stop seeing this thing? How do I stop experiencing this mirror? Because I don't gossip, I don't hit people, I'm not a violent person. And that's where people can get confused, and some people might even get discouraged and say manifestation or all of this stuff is not actually true. But it might just purely be the fact that you're not stopping yourself from paying attention to that thing. So yeah, you are not a violent person. Yeah, you do not gossip, but you're constantly in that state where you're paying attention to other people gossiping. You're constantly in that state where you're like, I don't like gossip. I don't like gossip. So what do you think you're going to experience? The universe doesn't respect words. The universe doesn't respect your thoughts. The universe only pays attention to the state of being, aka the energetic frequency that you are in. And if you're in an energetic frequency of, I don't like this, the universe is just like, okay, you just constantly don't like this. So let me give you more of this thing so you can just not like it more, because clearly you want to be in this experience of not liking something. Whereas if you just completely separate from that as best as you can, disconnect from that feeling as best as you can, rather than thinking, I don't like this, I don't want this experience, I don't want, you just be like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to not even pay attention to that. And then the universe is like, oh, okay, this person doesn't like to pay attention to that. Let me give this person more experiences of not paying attention to that thing. And boom, now you're on your way to being separated from something that you don't necessarily want to be a part of anymore. And obviously it's going to take work, it's not always easy. I'm not going to sit here and tell people, oh yeah, it's easy, you can do this and you can do that, it's in the blink of an eye. Things are not always easy, but they can be easier if you believe that they can be. They can be as easy as you want to believe them to be. If you pay attention to things and you're like, bitch, I know shit is easy, I know I'm getting more into that state of being. Like, in life is simple, but it takes a while to get there, especially if you've been in a life where you feel like everything's hard, everything's difficult, everything's trial and error. And, trial and error is not necessarily hard or bad. I was meant to say just trials, but then error came out because I kind of associate those two words in my mind. But yeah, especially if you experience constantly those experiences telling you that it is, and where people will even tell you, they'll be like, yes, this is hard, this is difficult. But then I've completely experienced a different side of the story, because I put myself into that program. I said, no, I'm not going to be under that program of everything's hard, life is difficult, life is horrible, life is not kind. Some things I'll still acknowledge, yeah, there's some things in life that aren't kind, but I'm not going to let that tell me that life isn't kind. No, life is fucking kind to me, baby. Life is a fucking kind to me. All right? Excuse my swearing, guys. Yeah. Anyways, I think that is a perfect way to end my video, and I will see you guys for the next one. Hey. So, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Looking forward to the next episode of Lessons and Law. Number 7, watch out for that one. Number 7, we're talking about separating. We're talking about rising above shit, seeing it from the outside looking in, the more expanded version of number 4. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you didn't, then that's all cool. All right. Peace. Oh, why? My mind is like, my mind thinks that is like for you guys to see. No, that is for you guys to see. Peace. Wow. So I will see you guys for the next video.